Welcome to Everything You Need to Know in 3 Minutes. I'm Michael Brooks. On Everything You Need to Know in 3, I pick a topic, sometimes from politics, sometimes from pop culture, sometimes fun, sometimes wonky, break it down for you, give you everything you need to know in 3. On this edition, Bernie Sanders does have a foreign policy. 3 minutes starts right now. So one of the main criticisms of Bernie Sanders is that he lacks experience and interest in the realm of foreign policy. This has been a consistent critique from the Clinton campaign, a critique raised by voters, and a critique expressed in the media. There's a couple of problems with this. First of all, Bernie Sanders has demonstrated some pretty good judgment in foreign policy, such as voting against the invasion of Iraq, which he speaks about regularly. But we also can see, if we're paying attention, the outlines of a very legitimate and well-taken foreign policy position and stance from him in a couple of different ways. Lawrence Korb, who was a foreign policy advisor to both Ronald Reagan and Barack Obama, recently wrote that Bernie Sanders is more serious on foreign policy than you think. And it's demonstrated in a couple of different ways. First, it's demonstrated by, as we know, he voted against the invasion of Iraq. He had a skeptical approach to intervention in Libya and has been a critic of U.S. overextension abroad. Now, some people think that that's just him being a lefty, but it's actually really him being a realist. Lawrence Korb said that Bernie Sanders' foreign policy would fit in the mold somewhat of people like Brent Scowcroft and other realist practitioners of foreign policy. Now, this is partially right, but it's also balanced by a moral dimension of foreign policy. This is why Bernie Sanders called out Hillary Clinton for having Henry Kissinger be a top advisor and someone that she praised and whose support she welcomed. Bernie Sanders knows that Henry Kissinger's record of supporting overthrowing democracies, of supporting atrocities, of conducting atrocities in Cambodia and Vietnam is not only morally wrong, but also destabilizing in the global and international realm. So really what you have with Bernie Sanders is a progressive realist, someone who wants less military action abroad, someone who wants to think more cautiously, more strategically about how we project military force abroad, and someone who has an interest in the moral and ethical dimension of foreign policy. What this means practically is less interventions, more concern for human rights, and more overall humility in foreign policy. He still needs to sharpen up on the Middle East. He needs to stop praising King Abdullah all the time, and he needs to rethink some of how he perceives the quote-unquote internal war of Islam. But his stance is sharp, it's progressive, it's realist, and it's appropriate for today's world, and that's everything you need to know in 3 minutes.